Hi grade 12s, welcome to today's session. I'm Hayley and I'm going to be taking you through today's work. We're going to be dealing with maps and plans. We're pretty much going to be focusing on paper 2 type questions. So I hope that you're excited. I'm really excited to be here to help you with this. And we're going to go through some questions. We're going to go through past paper questions. And let's see, before we get on to the questions, like I said, maps and plans. And let's just do a quick checklist. So what is the things that you need to make sure you know how to do? Well, the first things when it comes to map and plans, we need to understand the maps. We need to be able to also convert between centimeters and any other units. Now, mostly when we're dealing with our map, when you get a map, you're going to measure these units, you're going to measure them in centimeters. So you need to be able to convert between centimeters and maybe meters or kilometers. So you need to be able to do that. We need to, of course, be able to read off a map or a plan, actually make sense of it. We need to be able to use the map to calculate an actual distance. So if 5 centimeters on the map, what does that mean in real life? Actual distance. And then do the reverse. Given a real life distance, what was that value on the map? And finally, we need to actually understand general directions. Those are your north, south, east, west. But I tell you what, the best way to actually do this is keep that checklist, but let's go through some questions. So I'm going to start off today with question 1, and this has been adapted now from the November 2012 paper 1, question 4.1. So the length of a jet stream in the picture is 9.9 centimeters. So that's our picture here, and the length is 9.9 centimeters. Now, I always like to add things to my pictures, add labels, because it makes it easier for you to actually interpret the question. So we know that the length here of the jet stream that they've given us is 9.9 centimeters, while the actual length is 19.25 meters. And they want us to determine the scale rounded off to the nearest 10. Now, it's really important that when you're reading your questions, you highlight these things, what they want you to round to. Also, I like to go back and recheck my question, reread the question, and that's when you'll pick up if you've made a mistake with something like that. So we're determining the scale of the picture in the form of 1 is to what? So let's get a little bit more space now. So we want our scale of 1 is to whatever that is. What do we know? Well, we know that this is my plan, and this is my real life. So on my plan, I've got 9.9 centimeters. And in real life, they told me that it was 19.25 meters. So 19.25 meters. Now, once I've got that down, it makes it a whole lot easier to actually interpret. But I've got some bells going off in my head because I've got centimeters here and meters there. And remember, your scale has no units. Your scale is one measurement is to however many measurements, but it can be 1 millimeter to so many millimeters, one hand to so many hands. There are no units, so we need to be working in the same units. So the first thing I'm going to do is change that to centimeters. So how many centimeters are in a meter? We're going to times by 100. And you know what, you can get your calculator out. We've got a calculator, we might as well use it. There are 100 centimeters in a meter, so we get 1925. So let's rewrite that. So what we have is we have 9.9 centimeters is now 1925 centimeters. And once I have the centimeters, I can actually ignore them. Now I want to reduce this to 1. And that's my question mark. So I say, well, this is a ratio. What do I do from 9.9 to get 1? I divide it by 9.9. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to divide by 9.9. Now, because they want us to show working, what we're actually going to do is we're going to do the sum. We're going to say 1925 divided by 9.9, and we're going to get our answer. So on the calculator, we've got our 1925 divided by 9.9. We get our answer, and that's 194.44. Now I'm going to write this all out. 194.44. I'm going to write the whole number out, and then I'm going to go back, and it tells me, remember, round it to the nearest 10. So I'm going to round that to the nearest 10, which is 190. And then I need to write it in that way that they wanted it. So my answer is actually, let's go back to our pink pen, my answer is actually 1 to 190. And remember, no more units. We have already, we don't need the units because it's 1 centimeter is 190 centimeters, 1 meter, 190 meters, etc., etc. And that's our answer. Reread the question. So determine the scale rounded off to the nearest 10. I've done that in the picture in the form of I've done that. And now I know I've got it right. Can move on to the next question. Right, the next question is adapted from the November 2012, again paper 1, question 1.1. The Nell family lives in Klerksdorp in the northwest. They travel by car to George in the Western Cape for a holiday. A map of South Africa is provided below. Now, whenever we get a map, I like to look at the map, understand the map. Whenever you get a map or you get a picture or you get a table, interpret it first. So this is a map of South Africa. We need to find where do they live. They live in Klerksdorp, so I'm going to mark that. There's Klerksdorp. Hope that you can see the pink. And they are having a holiday in George. So we find George. And I know that you guys might not know how the map of South Africa looks, but you should have done so many of these in class where you should have actually looked at the map of South Africa. So even if you can't think, oh, well, where's George? They've told you. Hopefully you know where all the provinces are. But anyway, we've got it. So use the map above to answer the following questions. In which general direction is George from Klerksdorp? So we are looking from Klerksdorp. We are going in this general direction. And they want to know which direction that is. So we need to now look at our compass bearings, and I'm just going to do this just as a quick revision, just in case we've forgotten our compass bearings. So we've got north, we've got south, we've got our west, east. You can use this, and I'm sure you learned this kind of way back in one of your grades, grade 5s or something. Never eat silkworms. In between, we've got northeast. We've got southeast, we've got southwest, and we've got northwest. So if you'd like, draw that onto your paper. Just makes it a whole lot easier. Now we are going in that general direction. Which direction is that? So let me see, we are going in that direction. Important to note from where you are coming to where you're going. Otherwise you're going to get the general line correct, but the actual direction wrong. So what have we got? We are going southwest. So what I mean is if we were going in the wrong direction, if our arrow was facing up to Klerksdorp, then we would actually be saying northeast. So we've got our general direction, but the wrong way. So we are heading from Klerksdorp to George. Now, identify the national road that passes through only one province. Now, this is quite a challenging question, especially if we haven't done it before. Let's take away our arrow now. We are looking for a national road. Now, these roads that have N's next to them are national roads. We want one that goes only through one province. So if we have a look at our different roads, and we can go through each one of the numbers. N7, for example, goes through the Northern Cape and the Western Cape. The N2 goes up in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. The N1 we can see goes all the way from Gauteng all the way to Cape Town. So we need to find one that's kind of short and only fits into one province. So there is, and I'm going to have to, you would have found it, I know you would have found it, if you carried on looking. So N5 is only in the Free State, so that's one. And there is another one, and it is the N17. The N17, which is only, although it might pop into Gauteng, so I'm not really sure about the N17, but it looks like it's only in Mpumalanga. This is something that you need to just study the map, and don't worry about your time. You know, in paper 1 especially, because this was a paper 1 type question, you should have enough time. So rather spend a little bit of time, but don't spend too much time. So kind of like monitor your time. You know how many minutes, how many marks you need to do per minute. And I hope you've calculated that. So Don't spend too much time on a question like this, especially seeing as it was only worth, how many marks? It was only worth 2 marks. Okay, but the one that we would like to say is, I definitely want to say the N5. Maybe the N17. Okay, so it's not very clear where it started. Right, and our next question says, the family travelled along the N12 to Kimberley. When they reached Kimberley, they took a wrong turn and found themselves travelling on the N8 towards Bloemfontein. Now I'd like to know where they were. So let's go back to our map. Let's delete what we've got on our map. They were travelling, so I'm going to have to go backwards and forwards. They were travelling on the N12 to Kimberley. So they were travelling along the N12, they went to Kimberley. Then they took a wrong turn and found themselves travelling on the N8 towards Bloemfontein. So let's find, so we went on the N8 and they were going towards Bloem. And that was the wrong way. We can quite clearly see that they've gone wrong. Describe 2 possible routes without turning back to Kimberley that the family could follow to travel from Bloemfontein to George. Name the national roads and any relevant towns and description of the 2 routes. Now, when you're giving descriptions of a route, it's really important that you give us a lot of details. Your examiner needs to be able to follow your train of thought and use the road names. I don't want you to say, we're going to turn left. We're going to turn left onto the following road. So let's see where we are. We cannot go back to Kimberley. So first of all, on my picture, I'm going to say we can't go back on the N8. So we're going to have to carry on to Bloemfontein. And we need to find 2 ways that we can go to George. So we can carry on the N1 and carry on straight on the N1 all the way till we get to Beaufort West. And then we're going to take the N12 till we get to George. And that's one route. So should we say that? So the N1 to Beaufort West. And then follow the N12 to George. Now, there are probably quite a few routes that you can take. So that's one. Let's change our color. Let's go see if orange works. Right. So now we can carry on. Well, we delete that. We can go, let's delete that. Right. We'll take the N1. Then maybe we can take the N9 and carry along the N9 all the way till George. So we can go on the N1 and then the N9. So that's the second route. Take the N1 and then follow the N9. And we need to be specific. We need to actually tell them what area we are going to change from the N1 to the N9. So although it doesn't say so on the map, but we can say we're going to go into the Eastern Cape at that point. We're missing Beaufort West. Now we could have carried another route. We could have taken kind of the N6 down to East London and along the N2, which is a really nice scenic route, all the way from East London all the way to George. So there are a number of different things. But remember, read the question carefully. Have we answered? We wanted 2. We've given them 2 possible routes, and we've given the relevant towns and the description of the towns where we would go. You could actually be very specific which towns you're going to go through. Like I say, on the map, there are not that many towns. Be careful of lefts and rights on a map. Now, what might make it easier for you, pick up your paper, turn it around if you need to. So I tend to find that directions make sense to me if I'm going straight. So I always take my paper and I turn it around so that I'm facing straight. Then I know the lefts and the rights, and it makes it a whole lot easier for me. Okay. I also like to draw my north-south. Well, we've got a north here. I'd like to actually draw my north-south, west-east, because it also makes it a whole lot easier. So do whatever you need to make it easier. Colors and highlighters and little notes that you need to do on your paper. You can take your paper home afterwards. It doesn't matter what your paper looks like. As long as you've got the information, as long as you can gather the information, and it'll make it easier for you to actually answer the question. So let's see if we move on to our next question. Okay, it looks like we've got enough time to do the next question, and then you guys can have a bit of a break. So let's see. Question 3 is now adapted from the February-March 2013 Paper 2, Question 2.1. And there's quite a lot of reading. Now, I know that my matric class, always get a little bit lazy when it comes to actually reading the introduction. And they think they can just look for numbers. That's the shortcut, guys. Don't do that. You have to read everything. There's important information in the text. So let's see what it says. The South African coastline measures approximately 2,798 kilometers from the mouth of the Orange River to the west coast to Ponta Douro, I can't pronounce that, in Mozambique on the east coast. The Eastern Cape has approximately 800 kilometers of coastline. The map below shows the coastline of South Africa. So we're looking at the coastline from that river all the way along the coast, and I could draw this line, I'm not very good at it, to that point. And they tell us that that is 2,798 kilometers. And then the map goes on to say, the information goes on to say that the Eastern Cape is approximately 800 kilometers. So the Eastern Cape, where is our Eastern Cape? Our Eastern Cape is there. That is about 800 kilometers. So guys, can you see how I keep annotating the information? I keep putting it onto the tables that they've given me and the maps. So it just makes it easier to answer the questions. Right, so the question now says, determine the total length in miles of the South African coastline if the coastline of the Eastern Cape is approximately 500 miles. And you know, when I first read this question, I thought, panic, they haven't given me the mile-kilometer conversion. So now what do? Honestly thought, how do I move forward? But what do we know? Let's see what we do know. We know that the whole of South Africa is, and we've drawn it, 2798. Was it 2798? Was 2798 kilometers. We know that the Eastern Cape is 800 kilometers. And we know that the Eastern Cape is 500 miles. Now they want to know what South Africa is in miles. So can we see actually that what we have here is clearly a ratio? A ratio is where you've been given 3 pieces of information and being asked the 4th. That is a pure and simple paper 1 type ratio. Problem was, it was all intermingled within the text that we panic. So we're not allowed to panic. We are now going to write this as a ratio. So I wonder if I've got space. Well, I'm going to make space. So I know that South Africa on its whole is 2798. And I'm looking for how many that is in miles. I know that South Africa in kilometers was 800 kilometers, and in miles was 500. So can you see, and as long as we've got this is kilometers and this is miles, as long as we've got them set out correctly, we could have done it a different way, but it'll work. So now we say, well, what do we do from here to get there? We times by the second number over the first. In fact, I'm going to put my question mark at the bottom. I'm going to rewrite that. Let's try that again. So we've got the Eastern Cape and the Eastern Cape. South Africa, and how much is South Africa? So we're going to do it that way. It just makes it easier if your question mark's at the bottom. We multiply by the second number over the first. So we're multiplying by 2798 divided by 800. And you might not have done it this way, and I'll try it another way in a second. 2798 over 800. So let's rewrite this. We've got 500 miles times by 2798 over 800, and get our quick calculator out. So it was 2798. You can use your fraction button over 800, and we're timesing that by 500. And we get an answer of 1748.75. So that is 17, I need a pen for that, 1748.75. And that's miles. Now the question is, how do we know we're correct? We're looking for a number that is smaller than South Africa. Why? Because if you look here, our miles are less than kilometers. So if I ended up with an answer that was bigger than South Africa's coastline in kilometers, I know that I'm making a mistake. So I'm looking for something smaller. Is it smaller? Yes. We could have done this without the ratios. We could have done it with clear just logic. So we could have said, well, okay, how many kilometers in a mile? We could have worked out our ratio, worked out our units, and then multiplied by that. So there are a lot of different ways of doing things. And guys, only by practicing and practicing and practicing will you actually perfect your way. But I always like to look for ratios. Those are clear things that are going to be asked in every single section that you have, and you need to look. Have you got 3 pieces of information and being asked for the 4th? Then it's a clear ratio. So, we now want to, let's move on to the next question. It says, use the map to list the coastal provinces of South Africa in descending order according to the length of their coastline. So we want to go descending, means we're going from biggest to smallest, and we're looking at the length of their coastline. So we're going to go back to our map, and I'm going to delete these yellow lines that I had, and I'm looking at the following. So I've got 4 coastlines that are actually here. I've got from there, let's get a pen for this. From there, I've got the western coast, and the western coast ends. Okay, now we've got, let's try this one. From there to there, we've got the KwaZulu-Natal. Then we've got the Eastern Cape from there to there. And I'm trying to see where this Eastern Cape, no, it's not to the Eastern Cape's to there. And there's the Western Cape, and finally the Northern Cape. Okay, so I found my provinces. Those are the 4 provinces. Now we need to look at biggest to smallest. And what you can do is take your ruler and actually measure this. And it's not going to be the most accurate of measurements, but we can also kind of see from just looking at it, you might be able to see. We can clearly see that the Western Cape is the longest, especially seen as it's moving up and round and through and round. We've got all these bays that we go through. So Western Cape is the longest. And then after that, we can see the Eastern Cape, then finally KwaZulu-Natal, and lastly the Northern Cape. Like I say, take your ruler, measure it out, and check it out. So let's write that in. We see it as the Western Cape. Maybe we should have a capital C. And then we said next, so that was definitely first. Second one, I definitely think I'll change colors, and you'll be able to see this a little bit clearer. So if I look at the color of that one, I think that is not as long as the first, but definitely longer than the third. And finally, I changed the last color, you can see that the Northern Cape was actually quite short. So which one's the next one we need to write in? We need to write in the Eastern Cape. So that was the Eastern Cape. Then we've got KwaZulu-Natal. Let's put it as KZN. And finally, we've got the Northern Cape. So, important words that we need to actually take out of this is the descending. Descending order. It's important that you get this right. Ascending, descending, which is the difference? So remember, descending, we are going down, biggest to smallest. Ascending, going up from smallest to biggest. So those are important words that you need to be able to pick out and interpret correctly. And let's see, the next question says, Annie measured the length of the coastline of South Africa on the map and found it to be 223 millimeters long. Determine the scale of the map in the form, and we did this in question 1, rounded off to the nearest 100,000. So what do we know? Again, we kind of tend to panic before we actually try and answer. So we know that she has measured 223 millimeters. And then we think, well, now what? We need 1 to something. but we know the measurement of the coastline. So we go back to our first question, and we actually see that that was our measurement. So it was 2798. It's 2798, and that was kilometers. And again, bells are going off in my head like ding, ding, ding. Why? Because I've got millimeters here and kilometers there. So let's convert from kilometers to millimeters. And I'm going to do this with my conversions. I know you guys have seen this before. I'm going to put it on the side because just in case we get confused as to how to convert. So what do we have? We know from our ruler, and you all should have a ruler on you in your pencil case, we know that 10 millimeters is equal to 1 centimeter. We also know, hopefully from a ruler, and from imagining this, and I'm going to put it at my hands out, I don't even know if you can see them on the screen, a meter is 100 centimeters is 1 meter, and then 1,000 meters is 1 kilometer. So I like to write that out, and I tell all the kids that I teach to write that out, because from this we can do all our conversions. Where do we go? If we're going from a big number to a small number, from a small number to a big number, from the 1 to a 10, we have to multiply, and from a big number to a small number, we divide. And now we're going from millimeters, well, we're going from kilometers to millimeters. So I'm going to take a third color pen to show you this. We are going from kilometers to millimeters. We are going this way, so we are going to times. So let's take our number here. We've got 2798. We are going to times, and we do this step by step. So in our first step, we times by 1,000. And we go back to that side. Then we times by 100, which is just another 2 zeros, and go back, and then times by another 0, by 10. So we are actually multiplying this by 1,000,000. There are 1,000,000 millimeters in a kilometer. So let's do this on the calculator. I'll get my calculator out. So we've got 2798 times by 1,000,000. And be careful when you enter big numbers on your calculator. Kind of count. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. And I've got this huge number. So I'm going to write it out. Let's get to our calculator here. So we have, let's rewrite this. We have this 223 millimeters to 2798 million, so another 6 zeros. Whoops. Right, now I want this to be 1 to what? So what am I doing here? I am dividing by 223. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Divide by 223. So on my calculator, I already have that big number. So divide by 223, and I get an answer. And I like to count backwards from our zeros. So I've got 3 and 3. So I've got 12,547,085. So let's try to write that out. 12,547. So this was 12. Oops, I need a pen for that. 12,547, can't remember, 7,085. And that was 1. But remember, my question said round off to the nearest. What did it say? To the nearest 100,000. So where's my 100,000? I'm going to take a different color pen to do that. There's my 100,000. I've got 500,000. I need to round to the nearest. I'm going to look at the number after it. And clearly I'm going to round down. So my answer is going to be 1 to 12.5 million. And that's my 100,000. Answered the question. I've got the scale. It makes sense to me because when I deal with maps of South Africa, those are the kind of values I'm looking at. And we have done that, and we've answered the question perfectly. So now I think it is time for you guys to take a bit of a break, go stretch, get something to drink, but hurry back so we can finish this session. I'll see you soon. Welcome back, grade 12s. I hope that you had a stretch, you got something to drink, you are all ready to go because we need to finish this section. It's really quite a nice section and it's an important one. So let's move on to question 4. So Question 4 is adapted from the Feb-March 2013, paper 2, question 4.1. The Teacher Liaison Officer, or TLO, at Lucky High School is planning a 5-day leadership camp for all the members of the Representative Council of Learners, the RCL, at the Palm Beach Holiday Resort. They will be camping in tents and will use the conference facility at the holiday resort for their workshops each day. Each tent sleeps 2 persons, so that's an important fact. And then we've got a picture of tents. Love it. The dimensions of the rectangular base of each tent is 2 by 4 by 1.8 meters. So if we had to draw it, and I always like to draw drawings, I've got that's 2.4 meters by 1.8 meters. Just makes it easier to see if you actually can annotate your diagrams all along. The campsite allocated to them is L-shaped. The tents are pitched or placed as indicated on the sketch below. Well, there you go. So now we can see how our tents are allocated. So we can actually see that that was 2.4 by 1.8. We don't need to write that in always. So I like to do my own drawings. The layout of the tents is in the L shape. So there you've got your L, and so it's upside down L. The area needed to pitch each tent has dimensions, that is the length and the breadth, that are 15% more than the dimensions of the tent. Right, so we need 15% more. The following formula may be used. The area of a rectangle is length times breadth. Be careful, guys, this particular formula you might not always get. Length times breadth. Determine the minimum area to the nearest square meter of the campsite allocated to Lucky High School. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to worry about. First of all, whenever we're working out area or volume, anything perimeter, always look at what do they want your answer in and convert first. So they want our answer in square meters. So we are making a note here that it needs to be in meters squared. My dimensions that I had earlier actually were in meters, so I don't have a problem. Now I want to know the minimum area of the campsite. So I need to work out each tent. So how many tents? Well, my dimensions of my tent, remember, were 2.4 by 1.8 meters. For me to allocate this, I needed to increase it by 15%. So I'm going to say my 2.4, I'm going to increase by 15%, and I like to multiply by 100 and that percentage. So that's going to give me my increase. So 2.4 times 115% is 2.76. So that we need 2.76 meters. And my 1.8, let me do this one the way that some of you would be doing it, and you can see it's easier to do in one step. Let's work out 15% of 1.8. So 1.8 times 15% is 0.27 meters squared. So that was meters squared. But I need to add my 1.8. So I see that's 2.07. Meters squared. And I've kept to 2 decimal places. And I'm only going to round at the very, very end of this calculation. So for one tent, I need to work out the area of one tent. So I know my area now is, let's change colors so that we can see this. This is 2.76 and that's 2.07. So the area of one tent is 2.76 times by 2.07. Now I've left out my units at this point, but don't forget to add your units at the very end. And let's get our calculator out, and 2.76 times by 2.07, and we see that's 5.7132. 5.7132 meters squared. That's what we need for 1 tent. Now, how many tents were there? Okay, so we need the minimum. And did it tell us anywhere how many people there were? I don't think it did. It told us there were 2 people per tent. And we've got this L shape. So we can calculate, we can add how many tents there were. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 6 by 4. So that was 6 times 4. I'm just going to do that on the side here. That was 24. Plus here we had 1, 2, 3 by 4. That was 12. So we had a total of 36 tents. So now the total area was 36 tents times by 5,7132. Again, I haven't rounded. I'm going to keep this number because my calculator can deal with bigger numbers and I get a more accurate answer. But if you do round off during your sum, you shouldn't be penalized for it. So I'm going to keep that for now, times that by 36, and we see that I need 205,67, 68, 205,68, and that was meters squared. And now did my question ask me? It said determine the minimum area to the nearest square meter of the campsite allocated. So to the nearest square meter, my minimum that I have, if I have 205, it's not going to be enough. I'm going to have 1 tent that's kind of not fitting. So my minimum rounded is 206 meters squared. That is my minimum. Now guys, it's important to go back and reread the question, as we wouldn't have picked up that they wanted the nearest, it's easy to miss that, the nearest square meter. Right, let's move on to our next question. Now this question is adapted from the November 2012 paper 1, question 5.1. Maria has a house in, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, okay? The floor plan of Maria's house, showing the actual exterior measurements, is given below. So we have her floor plan, this is her house, nice to see north. Remember earlier I said, well, why don't we actually include that? Make your pictures interesting so it actually helps you to answer the question. So we've got a bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, living room, there's a front door, we've got some steps, and we've got dimensions on the board. And these on the drawings, these measurements are in millimeters. We've got those two, and it gives us our scale of our diagram. How many windows does Maria's house have? Now this is a crucial skill that you need to be able to read these plans. You need to be able to interpret the plans. Remember, the plans help you. Okay, so where are we expecting to see windows? We're expecting to see windows on the walls, and we're looking at these exterior walls. So, and they tell us, well, there's a window. So how many windows are there? Count them. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 windows. Maria's son says the house needs would be unsafe if there was a fire inside. Do you agree or disagree with him? Now, I love this type of question. It is your opinion. Do you agree or disagree? So we're looking at, would it be unsafe if there was a fire inside? So have a look at her house. Where are her doors? Okay, we have got a door here. These are doors. So we've got a door there. That's the entrance door. Is there a back door? There is no back door. If there's a problem in the bedroom, you need to go through the living room, out to the front door. In the bathroom, you've got to go through the bedroom to the living room and the front door. So if there was a problem, there's no back door in the kitchen. So your opinion, make a decision. Is it unsafe or is it not safe? So we can say, we're going to say we agree. There's only one door in or out the house. But you know what? It's your opinion. So you might say, well, actually having one door is not a problem, because there is still a way in and out of the house. If there were no doors, there would be a huge problem. But make a decision based on your decision, and it's your opinion. Right, let's move on to the next part of the question. The question says, the scale for the floor plan is 1 to 100 meters. Use the scale to calculate the length of the exterior wall on the northern side of the house. Right, let's find a little bit more space and we can write this in. So we know our scale is 1 to 100. And we know our real life measurement, because it's been given to us, is 7,000 millimeters. So this is our plan and this is real life. So we've got 7,000 millimeters in real life. So we are looking for how much is that on the plan. And what we do is a ratio, so we times by the second number over the first. So we're literally taking our 1 times by that. So we're taking our 7,000 millimeters and we are dividing by 100. If you guys would like, you can actually learn this as a rule of thumb. When you are given a real life value and a scale number, you can divide by the scale number. So what do we end up with? Well, we end up with 7,000 divided by 100, and that is 70. So on our plan, her house is 70 millimeters, and remember that's important. So that is the length of the house on the plan, 70 millimeters. Right, let's do the next question, and let's change colors because it all seems to be too close. The exterior side length of the house is what we need to calculate next, from north to south, excluding the step section. So let's go back to our wall. We've got our south wall, our wall. We want our from north to south, the exterior from north to south. So we're going to go from north to south. So that's this wall here, which is 10,714 millimeters, but it's excluding the step. So we need to exclude that. Now my 10,714 millimeters was up to the end. So I'm going to take that and minus my 1,200 millimeters, which is just that part there. So let's do that first. So it's 10,714 minus my 1,200. So on my calculator, 10,714 minus my 1,200, and that's 9,514. So that's 9,514. Remember, those were millimeters. And now we can just copy what we did in the question before. So we just divided that by 100, and we ended up with 95,14 millimeters. Now, guys, I know that that's a very small unit, very small. And I mean, if I say to you 0.14 of a millimeter, it's this tiny, tiny, not even probably as big as the line that you are drawing with your pencil. But our paper always says round off to 2 decimal places. So unless they tell you in the question, I want 2 decimal places, even if it doesn't really make sense to have 2 decimal places. So we answered the question. It says work out the exterior side length of the house from north to south, excluding the step section. We have done that. Now let's move on to the last part of our question, and the scale. We've got the scale again. The area of the kitchen is 72% less than the area of the living room. Calculate the area in meters squared of the kitchen if the area of the living room is 39.54 meters squared. So what do we know? Now there's a lot of information here and we need to pull that information out. So we've got the area of the living room is 39.54 meters squared. The area of the kitchen is 72% less than the living room. So we know that it is less than, so we are going to basically, our living room is 39 and our kitchen is 72% less. So if our living room is 39.54 meters squared, that represents 100%, and our kitchen, is where our question mark is, and that is 72%. So we can use a ratio to find out what the ratio of the kitchen is. So we can times that by 72%, 39.54 times by 72%. Use the proper button on your calculator. Percent is 28,47. Let's round it off. 28,47. That is 72% of the kitchen. But now it is 72% less. So we actually need to take our 39 and minus our 28,47, and the 28,47 was meters squared. So let's get our answer and take our 39,54 minus that, or we could have actually said, and that's 11,07 meters squared. We could have actually said, well, 72% less. In actual fact, that is like 28%. We could have just used that value, 28% of the value. So, having said that, guys, can you see that we were busy doing maps and plans, and all of a sudden percentage came up, all of a sudden ratio came up? So these are things that you need to know all the time. You need to be able to use your percentage. You need to be able to use your ratio. But having said that, I've taken this as the end, the last part of the question. So I'm going to, before I end off, I want to just remind you of our checklist that we had at the beginning of the session. Can you work with maps? Can you work with plans? So go back to the beginning of the session, check that checklist, practice, practice, practice. I know that maps and plans don't always come up in every paper, but you'll have to search for these questions, but find them because it can come up. It's really important skill. So make sure you can convert. Make sure you can read the actual value. Make sure you can calculate the value on a map. We have done every little bit of examples for you here. So practice and good luck for your exams. We'll see you soon. Bye.